For this hairstyle, obviously you can tell this gentleman has extremely thick hair. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick up the hair on top and use a scissor over finger technique. He has a really bad cowlick in front, so we have to over direct the hair back so it doesn't stick out. We're going to put a lot of texture on the top of his hair. So we are going to go with somewhat of a side part, but we're going to mess it up a little bit with a dry paste and spike it up a little bit with a textured look, and we're going to do a nice low taper around the edges. We're going to start in the front on the top section with our scissor over finger technique. Get our center guide, and remember, as we said in the beginning, we want to over direct the haircut, over direct the front far enough so that the cowlick does not stick up in front. So we'll show you what we mean right here. If that gets cut too short, no amount of gel will hold it down. So we want to make sure we keep our fingers parallel to the floor. And what that does is it keeps the weight in the corner so the hair will lay down. You know, even though we're going to go with a messy look, if he decides where he wants to part it and brush it down and brush it to the side, he'll have enough hair there to lay down. So now we're going to come on the other side. And we're going to find our center guide. And we're going to take very small sections. You can see your guide underneath. And his crown is right here, which is pretty high up on his head instead of down lower, so we can't bring the hair back too far. So when the crown is farther up, we have to over direct forward so we don't have the hair sticking up back here. If it's farther down in the back, then we would have to angle it more this way. So we're going to take one more section on the other side. Okay, so after we go through the top, we want to take a look at the front here and see how long the front is. But what I don't want to do, well, what we do want to do is brush his face off and what's your customer comfortable. I don't want to take a straight line and cut it across the front, because then what I want to be the longest part of the haircut will be the shortest part. So to take care of some of that length, we just won't over direct the hair back as far. We'll cut it here. And this will take care of some of that length and soften up the front without it being a hard straight line across the forehead. Now if you notice also, I'm only using the tip of the scissor and I'm not cutting past my center knuckle. That way you won't cut yourself. Okay, and that's shortened up the front just enough, because remember, we're going to stand it all up and brush it back a little bit. So the next step is going to be to grab our texturizing shears, and we're going to go through and do the same thing, except we're going to use our texturizing shears and take quite a bit of that thickness out of there. I'm using a 23 tooth blender, which doesn't take a lot of hair, so that allows me to keep the shear in the same spot without cutting length. And then when I pick it up, and if you take a close look, you can see how it's thinned out at the end, but it's still even. Okay, now we're going to come on the other side. Now this is going to be the thickest part. Opposite of his natural part is going to be the thickest area of the hair. It's because it's where you have all the hair laying over to the side. So we're going to get it a couple different ways. We're going to get it that way, and then we're going to come from the front. Make sure we get it all. By using a traveling guide and taking small sections, we avoid leaving any lines of demarcation. Okay, and now when we run the comb through that, you know, almost see that, almost it'll stand up on its own without any product. So now after the top, we need to go through and cut the round of the head section, which is this area around here, and prepare the hair for the clippers, for the clipper over comb portion of the haircut. Okay, now we're going to start in the back, we're going to work to the right, and then we're going to work to the left, and we're going to cut this area here, which I call the round of the head section. You can see our guide from the top right here. So when we pull the hair out, there's the guide. I want to line the guide up with my middle finger so I can't cut past my middle finger. And we're going to work our way around towards the front. We're going to spin the chair as we do it, or move your feet. I prefer to spin the chair. If you don't do either, what's going to happen is you're going to start reaching too far and you're going to wind up working your way down and the hair is going to be heavy towards the front. So you don't want your work to get too far away from you or too far out in front of you. Okay, and then we're going to come back to the center and find our center guide again. So we can see the top part, and then we're going to see our previous guide from the back. So we're going to have two guides. And we're going to work our way towards the front. And just pull the hair towards you. Keep constant tension on the hair and use a traveling guide. And then as we get to the front, this traveling guide becomes a stationary guide, and we pull the front back to that point. If we don't do that, right here in the corner, we'll wind up cutting a hole in the bangs. So after we cut that round of the head section, we're going to go back to the 23 tooth blending shear, and now we're going to use a clipper over comb technique. And we're going to thin that area out, just like we did the top. And give it a lot of texture. Because what happens if we don't do this and that area starts to grow in too much, it's gonna start to pop out and look really thick as the hair grows in. It's not going to grow in naturally. We want the haircut and the hairstyle to hold its shape for as long as we can in between haircuts. I like to have the comb on a diagonal or vertical because it's just like picking it up with your fingers. Okay, we're going to blend that right into the top. And now you can see we can part it to the side, we can comb it back, we can mess it up. He's going to have a lot of different options. Okay, now that we finished that, we're going to cut the rest of the haircut around the edges with our clipper over comb technique. I'm going to use my detachable blade clipper and a white clipper comb for the sides and back section of the haircut. So you can see the contrast when you're using a white clipper comb. You can really see the hair sticking out of the comb. I have a 1.5 blade on my clipper. So even though this client has thick hair and a lot of it, it's still very fine and very straight. So the 1.5 blade, because the blade's a little wider and the teeth are a little bit longer, it gives us the softer, more blended cut. So we won't see any clipper marks or scissor marks. And also, while we have the 1.5 blade on there, we can start our taper around the edges while we're doing it by taking the tip of the blade and using a scooping motion over the sideburns and around the ears. So we're doing two things at once. And you can see where the guide is right around here. That's what we're blending to. So we want to blend to our guide, but we don't want to cut into our guide. So again, that's the beauty of starting on the top and working down, is you always have a guide you're blending to. You're not guessing how short you should cut it or where you're going. And then we start our taper. And the advantage of a nice big clipper comb is it's as wide as the blade of the clipper, so you're not in danger of the clipper blade going off of the comb and cutting a hole in the hair, and it allows you to control a lot of hair at one time. Then you bend the head forward a little when you're in the back. So we're basically using the clipper comb as, if you think of the clipper comb as a plastic attachment, as we work our way up, you know, we're starting with it really close, and as we work our way up, we're pulling away farther and farther from the head. So it's pretty much kind of like using a 2, 3, 4 as we work our way up. Except it's much easier to control with the comb, and you're eliminating the steps of taking the clipper attachments on and off. Now this client has a nice thick hairline, easy to taper, so we just go to the hairline. And once the teeth of the blade touch the hairline, we use the scooping motion. And then the comb angle follows the contour of the head. So again, we're just blending up to meet our guide. Now once we meet our guide, you don't want to stop, because then that'll cause a weight line or a line of demarcation. You want to follow that imaginary line all the way through until you run out of hair. And then that way there's no blending to do. We completely eliminate the blending step. Okay, and then around the edges we start our taper. I like to stand in one spot and just spin the chair instead of walking around the chair. It saves time. It's much easier. And the beauty of a detachable blade clipper is it has a lot of power to move through a lot of hair. So you want to make sure you're using the right tool for the right job. And then in the front here also with the bangs, you want to angle that comb out and just blend it in. We don't want to cut a hole in the bang area. You have to be very careful. So there you can see there we're all blended in. We never actually put a line in, so we completely eliminated the blending step. And now we're going to come back and touch up around the edges with our adjustable clipper. Okay, now we're just going to finish that outline around the edges with our adjustable clipper. Before we go in with our trimmer, we want to further taper it out. Okay, we're going to bend the ear down, hold the clipper at a 45-degree angle. And then if you have to do a little clipper over comb, you can. This is the time to do it, not when you have the trimmer. The trimmer is an underpowered clipper. It's not, and it's a very blunt cut, so it's not something you want to do clipper over comb with. It's going to create a lot of weight lines and lines of demarcation. Okay, so we keep spinning it around. We have a nice taper already started. So we're going to scoop it out right when we get to the hairline. You want to keep that clipper on a diagonal when you're on the sides here. And you want to keep it parallel to the floor when you're doing the neckline. And be very careful not to round the corners. Okay, and then we're going to close the clipper halfway. Then we're going to close it down all the way. And we're going to take the clipper at a 45-degree angle, just like on the other side. And taper that out. We'll use a little clipper over comb if we have to around the outline here. We'll pull the ear down and do the same thing. Okay, that's it with the adjustable clipper. And then we'll pick up our trimmer and we're going to outline the sideburns. You want to make sure that the chin is parallel to the floor, so when we make our line it's nice and straight. If the chin is not parallel to the floor, your sideburns either going to be angled up or angled down. We'll pull the ear down and see if there's any hair sticking out and get those few long hairs. Okay, and then we're going to angle his head to the side. We're going to make a line. And then we're going to shave to it without cutting off the taper. You don't want to spend all that time making a nice tapered outline and then cutting it in too far. You want to leave it out on the natural hairline. So then the same thing on the bottom. You want to keep the blade parallel to the floor, and you want to stay about a ½ inch to an inch below the taper that you've created. Alright, we're going to do the same thing on the other side. You can kind of see where it should be lined right up. And then we're going to shave to it. And very carefully, just to the top of the ear. And I very lightly touch the clipper to the skin. I don't press it into the skin. I just kind of glide it around the ear. And then the rest I get from the front of the ear. And I like to use an upward shaving motion. It's a very sharp clipper. And I don't want to take a chance in nicking or cutting the skin. It's very sensitive around the ears. And then on the other side, we'll put our hand back on the head and make sure he's parallel to the floor. And we'll line off the other sideburn so it's nice and straight. And we shave up. Okay, so now we have the haircut complete, and we're going to move on to the style. To start out with the style, what we want to do is use a hair dryer and get that hair thoroughly dried all the way through, and we're going to use a dry paste to style it. A dry paste is going to be the best to get the hair to stand up better. If we use a heavy gel or a heavy pomade, it's going to lay it back down. We want to leave a more textured look. That's why we went through so much with the blending shears. So we're going to dry it through first, and then we're going to put the paste in and style it. Okay, now we have him completely dry. We're going to loosen up the cape and the collar, make sure we have all the hair off the back of his neck, and we're going to put the styling paste in his hair and style it in the direction that he would like. Okay, we have a decent amount of paste. We're going to rub it in our hands, good. Then we're going to get it through his hair on the top layer first, and then right down to the roots. And then for this particular style, we're just going to use our fingers instead of a brush to style it. And we're going to take just a touch more. And we'll grab a brush just a little bit right there. There we go. Now we're going to give you a 360 view of the completed haircut.